Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are streaming and creating today, and pay respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. My name's Flynn. I am hosting today. I'm very delighted to be hosting today because we are in a two-part series. So here we are on day 2 with the fantastic illustrator from Sydney, Blue Mountains, Bill Hope. Hi, Bill. Welcome back.
Hello. Thanks for having me back on, and welcome back to anyone who joined us yesterday.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I had such a great time looking into like all the book illustrations and everything. We also had some Photoshop sketching and illustrating happening, which was really cool. Chat was quiet though. There wasn't very many questions. So guys, if you have any questions, please let us know because we are live. So it's a good opportunity to answer questions if they do come up. Yeah, and you can put your questions in at Behance if you're watching on Behance or YouTube. We'll keep an eye on both. So throw any questions you have in or comments and things like that. But Bill, yeah, we had a great kind of stroll through the new book that's coming out on the 13th, I believe, August the 13th.
Yes,
with
less
Andy
than a week
Griffiths.
now.
Less than a week,
Yep.
which is very exciting. Do you have plans for launch day? Like, is there anything particular other than, I assume, posting something on social that you need to do on the day?
On the day itself, I will be in the middle of Sydney at a large bookstore there called Dimmick's on George Street, and
yeah.
I'll be doing some live drawing on
Quite
the
famous,
launch
the
day.
Comedics. Yeah, awesome.
At Dimmick's, we've got the whole big window out the front on the main street there. So we're
amazing.
sort of doing a takeover of that window, and I think I'll be inside the window drawing for a couple of hours. So
Wow.
that's kind of my part. But Andy's traveling all around Australia doing a bunch of events. And he's kind of doing a big virtual launch tomorrow, actually, from the State Library of Victoria. So that'll be streamed out to lots of primary schools
Is he
around
based
the country.
in Melbourne? Based in Victoria,
Yes.
at least? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. How exciting.
So
That's so cool.
yeah, we've got lots and lots of stuff planned, and I'm doing window painting at a couple of different bookstores around Sydney and the Blue Mountains. So we're all running around, and I think I've got an event next weekend at a bookshop in Western Sydney. So going all around, doing lots of promo.
Very cool.
Yeah, so if anybody's joining us for the first time, I'm talking about a book that I'm publishing in a week's time, which is called Adventures Unlimited, and it's written by an Australian author called Andy Griffiths. I know we may have many American viewers, so a good kind of analogy is kind of, he's almost like Jeff Kinney, who wrote the Wimpy Kid books. Similar kind of very popular children's author here in Australia. So we've written this book together. It's a big chunky 300-page book filled with illustrations, and it's a crazy story about these two characters who are you and me, and we're going on an adventure to a place called the Land of Lost Things. So yesterday we talked quite a lot about sort of the story of how this book came apart and came together, and working with an author. We talked a lot about sort of collaborating with an author, working with a publisher, and the whole process of how it came together, and the very nice story about how I was sort of picked to pick up this job through this live stream. So it's got a very nice link in with the Adobe live stream community.
Full circle. We've come
Absolutely.
Full circle. Yeah.
Very full circle moment. So today I wanted to talk a little bit more. I'm going to look at more of the pages of the book itself. So we're going to have a bit of a flick through the book. And I want to show you a bunch of different styles of illustration that I've done throughout it. The sort of the rendering of the drawing is very similar, but I wanted to play around with different formats and different compositions so it stays fresh. It's not just text illustration. I wanted the illustrations to take all kinds of different forms so you never knew what was going to be on the next page. So we'll go through a bunch of illustrations and we'll talk about different approaches I've taken to laying out the action on the page, how it tells the story, how it interacts with the texts, all kind of things like that. And because this is a book for kids, it's got to be funny. It's one of the main things you need. It's got to have some humor in it. And I've always loved drawing cartoons and comics. And I always worked very hard as a kid on sort of having the funniest birthday card or something for people. That was sort of my little outlet for my comedic drawing side. But this book's been a really great opportunity sort of to try my hand at sort of doing sort of age-appropriate humor for kids,
Yeah.
which is a really specific kind of thing. You need humor is understandable from a child, so it needs to sort of work at their level, but isn't too basic. So you're sort of pushing the kids a little bit and experimenting with different things that are funny, but it needs to be sort of conceptually funny, but visually funny at the same time to work as a cartoon. So I'm really looking forward to talking about how to do funny drawings, or what I think are hopefully funny drawings. I was telling Flynn beforehand that I had a very positive review from a 6-year-old recently, and I think that affirms, at least if a 6-year-old thinks my drawings are funny, that's all I really
great.
need.
Yeah.
So towards the end, I've got one idea for a comic that I think we could work through. But if you've got any ideas or anything comes to you while we're going through the drawings of ideas for funny drawings, I'd be really keen to chat about that, and any suggestions that come through in the chat would be fantastic as well. And we'll do some drawing and coming up with ideas together in sort of the second half of today.
Amazing.
Okay.
Great.
I hope that all sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
I'll get started. So I hope you can all see my screen. I'm just in Photoshop here, and I've just got a bunch of illustrations to show you. First one, obviously, is just the cover of the book. But if we go inside, here we are in chapter 1. So this one's probably one of the sort of more simple compositions that I'm thinking about. Our story's just begun. Our characters have gotten to their adventure-mobile car, and they're whizzing down the road. And what I like about this one is that we've got relatively little text up the top of the page here. So it says, once we were all suited up, you said, let the great lost lucky rabbit's foot finding quest begin. And before we knew it, we were hurtling down the highway in our uncrashable adventure car. And you sort of read the text first. So you might read the first 2 bits of the text. And I've started the illustration on the top right-hand side of the page, kind of where you'd finish the text. And then you can sort of follow the line of the road as it goes down the page. And we kind of end with the car leaping out towards us in this kind of really action-orientated thing. I like this because it's something where it pretty simply tells the story. We're setting off on our adventure. There's a nice line of action that goes across the 2 pages of the book. But there's a couple little jokes along the way if you want to look closer. And that's a big thing that we try to work into this book. Andy, the author, told me that kids read these books multiple times. Often he'll do a book signing, and a kid will have bought the book, been in line for an hour and a half to get to the end of the signing queue or something, and they'll get to the end of the queue and they said, I just finished the book, I read the whole thing while I was waiting in the queue, and then they'll go home and read it again. So because of that, you kind of want it to work on multiple levels. You need jokes that are going to register the second or third time that they read the book. So throughout a lot of these illustrations, you'll see I'm trying to kind of hide things in that you can come up with later. So if you're following the road down, you might not notice that they drive off the road, do a backflip off a whale's tail, land back on the road, and then they take off. Or you might see the sheep in the bottom left-hand corner who's dropped their milkshake or something like that. You might notice that in the car that's being jumped over, instead of 2 people driving the car, they've got 2 dogs driving the car. Just little things like that I'm trying to sort of sprinkle through the illustration.
Yeah, really cool. And it's absolutely true. Yeah, like kids will just have their favorite book. Like it'll be like we do with TV shows, right? You have your comfort shows and things like that. Yeah. It's exactly the same sort of behavior, I would think. Like we've got a library of books, but it's very difficult to get off certain books. Golden Egg is one of those books. There's like 10 books that we rotate basically. And it's very, they absolutely read them over and over again by themselves, with other people, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and also for early readers, the pictures are so important. Like I've seen young kids who are sort of 3 or something looking through similar kind of books, and they can't read yet, but they love just sort of looking at the detail and piecing together what might be happening in the story. So you really want it to be able to work at multiple levels of literacy as well. This watercolor that I've got on screen here, this is not connected to the book at all, but I did this recently, and you can see it's just those 2 dogs from the car below. I just love the characters, so I've sort of taken that in a different direction.
But you've done the same thing here as well. Like you've got the PVC piping up the top that you'll often see on like a trade person's ute. I never know what those things are full of, but this one has a label that says sticks, which is awesome because it's like a nice little dog pun. and the
Yeah,
number plate
yeah.
says Good Boys. Like, it's awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
Vote
yeah.
for Rover 98. That same sort of little detail hiding.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got lots of that coming up. So,
Awesome.
as the adventure car keeps going in this book, we were talking about last time that sometimes the story needs to take precedent, and sometimes the illustrations take precedent, and sometimes there's just a funny idea for a picture, and you just kind of stop the story, and you've got a fun picture to look through, and that's kind of like a different activity. Then you get back to the story. So we kind of did this on this. So this is a double page spread. All the drawings I'm showing you are double page spread, and you need to kind of think about the physicality of a book when you're doing this sort of thing. And one of the big things to think about is the gutter, which is just the line that goes between the pages. And it's been a real learning curve for me about what is going to fall into the gutter and what can stay out of it. And so you're kind of working with the dynamic of how a book opens and what gets lost in between those two pages. But this one is... they're driving along in their adventure car, and it just says, we saw a lot of things beginning with R. And you can kind of look through down the road, and they're going under a rainbow, past a recycling bin, there's a radio, there's some raspberries, there's a rat with a radish that's saying he's really ravenous, there's a reindeer saying it's a reckless road trip, they go off a radical ramp, across a river, there's a raft, a rake, we've got a rooster, we've got a raging rhinoceros. We've got a robot saying it's a ridiculous rigmarole, all kinds of things. And this is just one of those pages. It's like a sort of look and find, where's Wally kind of thing.
Awesome.
This is a different kind of setup, this one. So we've got a little bit more text on this page. And we've been driving in our adventure car, and they accidentally drive off the side of a cliff. And this is an interesting one in that we've kind of got multiple jokes happening within the same picture. The central idea of it is it's sort of you're seeing from the cross, like a side-on view of a little car dropping off a cliff, and it's one of those things that's just like a very simple sort of piece of physical humor or a slapstick joke where a little car is just gone off the cliff.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a transition as well from a previous joke that was happening about a bunch of street signs into a secondary joke that we've got down here about a bunch of sharks at the bottom of the cliff who are going to eat them. So we've got the shark saying, have you guys had lunch? I was thinking of getting some yum car. Oh no, I'm on a low carb diet right now. What about carbonara? So we've got lots of just kind of silly puns in there, but I like this one because it's kind of a transitional page going from one stage of the journey to the next.
Awesome.
When we talked about sort of hidden jokes, sometimes you want to take this to sort of, you want to sort of let that sort of take over the whole thing. So on this page, they're falling off the cliff in their car, and they've got to hit the fly button to turn their car into a flying car.
Yeah.
And with this one, we just wanted a whole page of just showing all the different buttons they could be pressing. And you can kind of just look at them pressing the fly button and go on to the next page if you like. But if you like, you can spend your time looking at what happens if you press the button or the popcorn nozzle, what kind of setting for the amount of butter that you'd like on the popcorn nozzle, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about this page is thinking about this book's being translated into quite a few languages, and someone will need to translate all of these silly pun jokes that I've come up with. So we've got really sort of silly jokes like this is the glove box here, and then below is the dove box with just a random dove inside it. And I just think it's very funny. Someone's going to have to translate this into Korean at some point.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. I wonder if the puns like translate and things like that, right?
Well, probably not, because so many of the puns are just sort of chance, really, that they rhyme one meaning with another.
Yeah.
And I remember I loved the Asterix and Obelix books when I was a kid. And I remember being... and there's so many puns in those comics. And I remember being scandalized when I realized that they were written in French. So I'm like, I'm not getting any of the original puns or the original names. Someone's translated those. I mean, they're still really funny, but I hadn't even realized that someone's done all this work of rewriting all of those jokes into a different language.
Yeah. I love this, like, Alessandra in chat saying, wow, look at all the details. Yeah, it's like this page, like the angle, and just it's quite a different type of illustration. Like you get to see all this detail of the inside of what was like a tiny little car just before is really interesting for that kind of world building. It's like, oh wow, what does the back seat look like? Like there's a lot of detail in this world that you get a kind of glimpse of, and then you sort of fill in the rest by yourself.
Yeah, and that's something I've really wanted to do with this. And you're right about it being a world building exercise in that once you can imagine that's what the dashboard of the car looks like, it kind of gives you scope to think. You kind of imagine, well, this world is detailed, and if I zoomed in on any other part of this picture, it would be similarly complex in my imagination, even if I just give you a little glimpse. This is another complex one, and this is kind of imagining we've zoomed right out. This is a map of the land of lost things, and it's a ridiculous map where it doesn't tell you anything. It's the map's constantly questioning, are you over here? Or maybe you're over here. What if you're here? And there's snails swallowing the Titanic, and there's crazy ducks, and there's the missing meadows and the astray stream. There's all sorts of things. And again, this is one of those ones that if you want, you can spend 10 minutes looking through everything on the page, or you can just sort of skip on to the next thing and keep going with the story.
Nice.
There are lots of pages of text in the book. I'm just kind of selecting the ones that are more visual for this exercise. But this is one where we've transitioned from our adventure car and we've ended up in an adventure boat. And again, this is a really nice one where we kind of take a break from the story, and right now we're just floating down a stream. So we start floating down the stream with our characters. They go into the Key Colony. They go into the forest of forgotten handkerchiefs, down the waterfall. Have to get past the whirlpool that's flushing away all the lost phones. There's all sorts of things going on, but you can notice there's kind of a gap through the middle here where I've avoided putting any of the speech bubbles or anything in this picture. And again, that's kind of keeping the gutter of the page in mind.
So it's just very quickly before we move on from that one, or in the same vein of a couple of these, there's all these other places that they've gone. The Key Colony, like there's this huge adventure that they're on, but you're only getting to see these kind of milestone moments. It reminds me, there's this episode of The Simpsons that always really bugged me when I was a kid, and obviously I got older and I figured it out. But Homer says, I'm going to take this shortcut, and they're all in the car. And they take the shortcut, and then it says like 1 month later or something, and the car's beaten up. There's like part of a rocket in the back. There's all these visual clues that they just went on some crazy adventure. And the joke is, Homer says, look, we finally made it. Let's never speak of the shortcut again. And you don't get it. And when I was a kid, that really bugged me, because I was like, where did they go? Like, what did they do? This is so interesting. But of course, they're just kind of implying that all this crazy, funny stuff happened. You know the characters, fill it in yourself. We're going to continue on with the story. And that's kind of the same sort of thing I'm seeing here. Like, it's so fun and exciting. Yeah,
and we never explain what the Key Colony is or anything like that. It's the same thing. You kind of want to imply a great adventure that they're going on. And this continues on from the previous page. But again, like we were talking about with the zooming in and out, I've kind of gone for a bit of a close-up as they go through the land of the toothbrush folks, who, again, are just a kind of a throwaway. And then they fall down the waterfall and all end up in a little kind of stack on the boat here. And I'm trying to sort of keep the drawings kind of visually fresh in terms of looking from different angles and different perspectives, but I'm trying to sort of have different kinds of jokes and things in there, or different styles of approach. So something like the ahoy there, gentle toothbrush folks, it's kind of just an oddity. It's just a strange thing that's happening.
Yeah.
Then they're singing a song. They say, row, row, row your boat, don't know where we are. Merrily, 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 shame we crashed the car. They've crashed the car previously, the uncrashable car. That's kind of like just kind of a pun, or a sort of a written joke. And then it's something visual where they're falling down this waterfall and ending up in this little stack at the bottom. So there's things like that where I'm kind of trying to switch up. It's not the same kind of joke over and over again. You're sort of trying to experiment with different approaches to it.
Yeah, it's so cool.
One thing I found really interesting working through the story is the idea of pace as well, how fast or how slow the story's moving. A lot of the time with these kind of books, you're trying to sort of, Andy's very, the author is very keen on the idea of like, I want this book to be sort of, you can't put it down. It's got to be really exciting, because he's really keen on introducing kids who might might be their first chapter book or might be struggling with literacy. He really cares about literacy and getting kids to read books. So he really wants to grab kids' attention. So early on, everything's one thing after another. It's going very fast. But with a story, you want to feel like there's sort of fast bits and slow bits. So this page in this illustration is kind of an example of the text is, "We sailed peacefully through the night, lulled by the soft flapping sound of flying socks." So they've ended up in this bathtub and they've connected it to a bunch of flying socks and they're flying through. So it's a ridiculous thing and there is action, but it's quite a sort of peaceful, calm scene of them just sort of floating through the sky. But again, if you want to look closely, you can look down and there's a river with a big tentacle coming out of it. There's this big snail with its eyes are headlamps. There's a big shoe over here. There's lots of things to find, but we're kind of taking a moment to sort of give the reader a little breath before we start up the next sort of bout of silliness or craziness.
That's awesome. I love their socks. Some of those socks are very happy as well. They seem quite fine with their lot.
Oh yeah. The socks all get out of this fine, and they escape in the end. This is another one. I mean, obviously, this sort of speaks to my sensibility of loving sort of complex things. But this is a scene where our characters go into a foot shop. It's a shop that just sells feet, run by this slightly creepy cat. You kind of wonder where he got all these feet from. And they're going through the door into this murky shop, and you can see all the different kinds of feet. So they've got their new webbed foot range. They've got robot feet. They've got assorted feet. They've got great feats of strength. They've got a little cabinet here filled with insect feet.
Little tiny feet.
And you've got an empty cabinet for snake feet. Once they find any of those, they've got all sorts of things going on.
Right.
So this is a sort of a page where we're introducing a new character. So we've got a new character that come along, which is the pirate rabbit. And again, this is one where we're kind of taking a break from the story, and it's just we're going to show you this big exciting scene. So it takes up the full page spread. Secondly, the captain was a rabbit, which could only mean that the captain was a pirate rabbit. So we've got him swinging into scene with this big exciting pirate ship called the SS Imminent Demise. Which doesn't bode well for this character's future. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about the different kinds of brushes that we were using in this book. And I was saying I've used quite a limited selection of kind of textured digital brushes. So pretty much all of this is done with the one kind of brush, but I've used that really nice textured brush that I've got to give a sort of bit of the ocean spray and a bit of the texture there. And I thought it was... especially when you're using textured brush, you can really overwork things or add in too much detail. So I've tried to use a very reduced palette of tones. It's just in black and white. And that kind of lets the texture of the brush really speak for itself, especially when I'm doing something like water spray or something like that. You can kind of just let the brush do the work for you with something like that. Okay. Let me just check how we go for time. Okay, got plenty. A few more here. So we've got, again, a different kind of approach here with this one. I really wanted the opportunity to try something. We talked a little bit about how Andy was very encouraging me trying different approaches. So we have a whole chapter that's a comic about how this pirate rabbit, he tells the story of how he lost his foot. And I won't give the ending away too much, but it's one of those ones where I could really sort of be silly, take it to other worlds, introduce. They end up in a hospital that's entirely run by vending machine surgeons. Something that's a real sort of leap of imagination. But we've kind of set a precedent throughout the book that there's no humans in this book. It's all sort of either anthropomorphic or sort of made up monsters or characters. So we've really like the intention that we went in naming the book Adventures Unlimited was that it's kind of like this is an open slather. It's a play space where we can do whatever we want. So hopefully by the time readers get to this book, there's no questioning of why is that surgeon a vending machine? You kind of just hopefully go along with it.
Yeah, totally.
This was one of my favorite sequences from the book. So our characters are evicted from the pirate ship by the pirate rabbit, and they're forced to walk the plank. And it turns out to be a very, very long plank. They just kind of keep going along the plank. And the whole chapter is formatted in this sort of side-on view where you see them walking along this very, very long plank that just goes on and on and on. And similar to what you were saying, Flynn, we kind of get to lose ourselves in separate worlds. So suddenly they're having to walk the plank on the pirate ship, and then we're in plank world. And you sort of start thinking, if you were stuck on a plank forever, what happens in plank world? And you might stop at Planky Pete's and get yourself a plank shake or a plank burger. There's plank plaza that you might run into, and there's different kind of planks. There's swanky planky and cranky planky and lanky planky.
I love
Again, no idea
planky.
how anyone's gonna translate any of these things.
I love how he's a bit rougher. He seems like a bit rougher as well. Like he's
been
deteriorated a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's probably been part of a jetty. Or maybe he's some sort of old plywood from a building site, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know where Swanky Planky comes in. Maybe they're, who knows. And again, with this one, it's kind of like we've taken a simple premise that we've dragged out in the book and just tried to make this a fun, silly chapter, but I'm constantly trying to sort of fill additional stories in. So we've got this section of these two birds flying along, one saying, "Hey, aren't you flightless?" And he says, "Oh no, I forgot," and then suddenly falls out of the air. Doesn't make any sense, but it's kind of just another throwaway joke that we're putting in there. This page is again one of those ones that I think of a page that's kind of like a breather. You sort of take a second and. It's a sort of slightly more emotional part of the book, so I'm not filling in this page with additional jokes. You kind of want one moment in the book to be slightly sincere. It's a very insincere book, but I think you could sort of undercut that by trying to add in too many jokes to something like this. So it's just a nice sunset page where these characters are separating for a moment.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And the last one that I'll show you from the book, before we get to doing some sketching, is just this one here, which is a page where they've disappeared into a tunnel and they're kind of working their way. So you've got this cross-section of... actually, you may be familiar with this from the Golden Egg book, Flynn. There's a Rabbit Warren page, and this is a similar kind of thing. So you see our characters going through these tunnels and sort of needing to lift each other up and work their way through. And there's lots of sort of hidden little jokes or stories in there as well.
Yeah.
So again, trying to sort of play with the perspective through which we're looking at the same world and the same characters. Okay.
So good.
And we're kind of towards the sketching stage. So if section of the book. If there's any questions about the book or compositions or anything like that, let me know. But now we're going to start chatting a little bit about sort of kind of the mechanics of trying to put together a joke or working up a joke on paper. It's one of those things that you want to feel natural as you're reading it for the first time. We talked a lot about yesterday about sort of the importance of clarity when it comes to these things. You want to be able to sort of understand the joke quickly as possible so it doesn't feel labored in some way. It can be complex, but it can be something that's got layers to it, but you don't want to make it work for people. It's almost like if you're watching a stand-up comedian, you want to have confidence in their ability to perform for you. And similarly, as an illustrator, you sort of want the joke to be good, but the delivery has to be good. That's almost as important. So it inherently makes things less funny the more you talk about them, but that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to take hopefully a okay joke and then destroy it by talking about it too much.
Right. Well, that's like a comedian, right? Like the more they there's often comedians will sort of or they'll say they can often lose respect for the audience because they do their routine. Those comedians that do the same stuff all the time, they do the routine so much that they're basically like dance puppets, because they've done the jokes so much, they know exactly when and what type of laugh they're going to get at what time, that they can often sort of feel a little bit in contempt.
That's so
the
interesting.
same thing over again, like the Vegas comedians and stuff like that. Like, they're just doing it in their sleep, basically.
Yeah. And it's funny because it would be such a disconnect between the audience, which is having a totally in the moment experience,
right,
and the performer, where it's entirely predictable what they're doing. And I suppose if you had if you'd done something like if you're Jerry Seinfeld or something, like, you're 100% sure something's going to work at one point. It's very interesting. I don't know if I'm ever going to be funny enough to get to that point, Flynn. I think I'll have to live in suspense up till now.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so here's a joke that I wrote. This isn't in the book, but it's using some of the characters. So there's two characters in the book who are Jimmy and Johnny Knucklehead. And they do end up disappearing on a pirate ship. So I thought I would use a classic premise of comics. If you're looking at like New Yorker cartoons or anything like that, there's quite a few sort of classic cartoon premises. And something might be like, could be a chicken crossing the road. It could be someone lying on a psychologist's couch. Things like that are really sort of basic templates. And the people stuck on cartoon desert islands is a very classic premise. So I thought I'd use that. So we've got our two characters on their desert island, and one of them's up a tree and he's grabbed a coconut, and the other one's saying, "Coconuts, I hate coconuts. What about lasagna? Has it got any lasagna?" And it's these two characters, and they're very out of place. And I guess the humor, if you see it there at all, is derived from kind of the disconnect of the setting and their reaction. Some of that may come from the way that they're dressed. They're in suits. It might be the way that they're standing. I've got this guy in a sort of slightly unnatural upright position. Even things like the way that one arm is facing down and one is sort of raised up to speak. It feels like quite a formal kind of posture. And all of that is sort of in contrast to the more extreme situation that they find themselves in, of being stuck in on a desert island. And I might enhance that kind of sensation by having simple things like a horizon where you can see out to the distance and there's nothing there. The sharks going around the island, the skull that I've put in, all of those things are little clues that you're putting in, saying like, it's a desolate island, there's nothing there. So I think a lot of humor is about sort of highlighting contrast or disconnects or something that doesn't feel right, two things working together. So kind of the formality of the characters to the extremeness of their situation. And then, so that's one sort of layer that it works on, and another layer is obviously the thing that the one character's saying. I guess the first part of the joke is that he's surprised that there's coconuts in a coconut tree. You think everybody knows it's a coconut tree that's going to be there,
right?
And I guess the second part about it is I guess the lack of gratitude that the character has, that he's abandoned on this island, but it's not even that he's and they've found food, but he doesn't care that it's food. It's not the food that he wants.
It's like a beggars can't be choosers situation. Like his
So it's kind of the arrogance of the character to not want that food that's there and want a different food. And then you've got the choice of the food that he wants. I guess another layer to it is that he's asking, does the tree have something else? Which is ridiculous because trees don't have options. Right. It's coconut tree. Just
like it's a shopkeeper or something. It's like, come on, like what else is on the menu? That can't be all they have.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then I actually spent a while sort of thinking about like what food works as something to request. It's funny thinking about like some things are kind of fun or funny to say. like, I feel like if you said, what about sandwiches? It wouldn't work quite in the same way. There's something, you want something that is a little bit specific and a little bit different. So something like lasagna, it's kind of a funny word, lasagna. I mean, I guess it's an Italian word, so it sounds different to English. It's quite specific in that it's something you would ask for.
Yeah.
But originally I wanted it to be like, I don't know, like, what about rigatone or something really specific like that? But you need it to be able to work at the level that a child could understand, and all kids will know what lasagna is. So it's like and sorry, I know I'm really belaboring this, but this is what I find interesting about like the sort of levels that I'm trying to think about it. What's the word selection that I'm trying to come up with to try and make this joke work? So we've got the layer of he doesn't know it's a coconut. He's annoyed that it is a coconut because he doesn't like coconuts. He's going to ask the tree for something else, and he's going to ask for this specific weird thing. So there it is. That's my overly belabored joke. Yeah.
I love it. So yeah, I mean, you talked about layers, which lasagnas have layers. And also we talked a little bit about refinement in terms of killing your darlings and like throwing things away. And I find that you do have to do that on a joke. I can't remember the comedian, but they're talking about perfect jokes, and perfect jokes have no fat on them. And so there's not an element in there, and it's usually in like I think they were referring to stand up, but it might relate to this maybe in what we're talking about, is you don't really want anything in there that's taking up room that doesn't need to be there, gets in the way of the joke. So the same thing that, you know, talk about, there's no fat on that joke. Like you can't take a single word out and it would still make sense. And if you add a word, it would be superfluous. You don't need it. So this idea of refinement that we talked about yesterday, I guess in creating things is quite an interesting concept to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. And through doing this book, it's been a really new process of me of trying to do that. Or I've always liked coming up with comics or little catch, like doing the speech bubbles and things like that. But I've never really done it sort of professionally as part of a job. So it's been really interesting doing that. And you're absolutely right. It is that sort of reduction about like what are the important things that are coming up. And yeah, there's lots of things I could add to this scene, but even with the visuals as well, you're trying to sort of think about like, what's the function of each thing that I'm adding to this, and what's kind of clutter that I could take away from it.
Yeah.
So there's two things I thought we could do in the remaining time that we've got. There's something that they do in the New Yorker magazine, which is called the cartoon caption contest. Where there's sort of a premise for a joke, but there's no caption, there's no text that goes with it. So I've got this one here, which is obviously a banana slipping on a person, but we've got a blank space down the bottom for a caption. So I'm going to leave that one for a second there. And if anybody in chat or you, Flynn, have any suggestions, I've got an idea for what it could be.
Okay, really good. So we got somewhere to go if I come up blank.
Yes, yeah. But anything that you've got for banana slipping on a person instead of the other way around.
All right, chat. If you do have it, throw it in. Save me, because it's going to be hard. But maybe we'll come up with something. But yeah, if you've got anything.
Okay. In the meantime, I might start sketching up an idea that we had. We were talking about jokes before we got on the stream, and wonderful producer of the show, Joe, had a suggestion for one, and I thought we could kind of just work through it and try to sort of think through the parts of the joke, and we'll sketch it up. So the premise for it was that we had our characters who have gone to the Land of Lost Things. So this is the place that the book is set, and the Land of Lost Things is filled with your sort of toothbrush that you left at your friend's house, or your umbrella you left on the bus, so you've lost your car keys or something like that. It's filled with all the lost things that people have lost track of over the years. And Joe was talking about it would be funny to see some of the characters coming across something that they've lost in the past. but it being not quite the size that they thought it was.
It's a great idea, Johanna. Good job.
Which is a really good setup for a joke. And I think if I was doing it in the book, it would probably work quite well as a two-parter. So it might be a two-panel kind of comic. Flynn, you talked about the possibility of like playing with scale. If it was something way off in the distance and it looked like the thing they were looking for, but once they get to it, it's the wrong scale. So you could do something along those lines. So we might have it from two different perspectives. One would be the distant one and one would be the close-up, so we can kind of see the before and the after. So we'll start sketching up the first panel. Might have two characters here. I'll just do them really roughly. And they'll just be pointing into the distance to point out the thing that they've lost. So again, like I want to be sort of resourceful in how I'm drawing this up in terms of using the two characters that I've got to give additional information. So one of them obviously is pointing into the distance, and the other one I might have with their arms kind of up like they're sort of surprised. So these two characters here. And I'll just do a very rough version of the characters from the book with their cardboard box adventure helmets on. But we'll be seeing both of them from the back. Have you ever tried your hand at any kind of comic drawing, Flynn?
I never have, but I was always a huge fan of the Far Side series. I don't think there's a Far Side, which is Gary Larson, I believe, that I've not read. Like I think I've had like his whole collection at one point. I don't know if he's done things since then, but and yeah, I always found them hilarious and funny, and I think it was a little bit to your point about the age group of understanding humor, and because I got into it because my dad liked them or something, right? Like, and they were just around the house, and of course I didn't get most of them, but then as you get a little bit older, you start understanding more, and then hopefully you get to an age where you like to think that you get most of them. You just either don't find something funny, or maybe there's an American reference in there that doesn't quite translate, or a generational thing or something. But always found those really, really funny. And it also reminds me, again, Adobe Live, talking about The Simpsons, it does remind me a lot about The Simpsons as well, just in that sense of, and I know this wasn't your question, but the idea that when you're a kid, there's a layer of jokes that you get, and then you get a bit older and you go, oh, that's what that whole scene was about. I never really got that when I was a kid. So I love that sort of thing. That doesn't really answer your question, but
absolutely. And I mean, exactly the same thing for me. Like, we didn't have all of them, but I had a few of the Far Side comic books in our house. And once I've sort of needed to produce lots of drawings, I'm sort of trying to come up, sort of sitting down and trying to come up with a joke, which is the least funny state to be in ever. You're just sort of sitting there on the couch, just like, come on, think of something.
Be funny.
But I find that the main influence I have is like hundreds of Gary Larson cartoons going around in my head.
Right.
And I find that most of the time when I come up with something that I think is good, I'm probably just doing a version of Gary Larson.
That's what we do, right? Though we emulate the greats, and I think South Park episode ages ago, they're just like, Simpsons did it, because the Simpsons have just done every joke almost at that point, unless there's new input like current events or things that didn't exist back then you'll probably find that something that's done so many jokes may have already covered it or done a version of that joke. It is a bit of a regret that, I mean, I saw The Simpsons, I didn't have a TV growing up, and I saw The Simpsons at friends' houses, obviously, but I didn't get that time to really sort of sit with it like some people did, and I guess I could go back and watch all of The Simpsons now, but it's
one of those things that is like a constant reference for everyone. It's such good quality stuff, and I kind of wish I had all of that stuff.
That's okay.
Banging around in my head as
You
well.
have talent because you didn't sit around watching TV, so that's totally fine.
I'm
Totally
sure
fine
it
compromise to
some benefits.
the Simpsons references taking up room in my head don't pay the bills, so it's a compromise for the rest of us. Did you draw a lot? Like, do you think part of, like, you know, not having a TV growing up, do you think there was a lot of drawing and kind of artistic expression because of lack of staring at a TV?
Yeah, probably. I think there definitely was a lot of drawing, but I mean, I kind of got into, I suppose I would have been very open to more distraction when I was a teenager. Certainly, I think if YouTube had been available when I was a teenager, I probably just would have spent most of my time watching YouTube. But so in some ways, I think probably not having the internet was probably more impactful than just not having a TV. And it's no sort of like, on account of not having a TV. Like, if there's a TV playing anywhere, I cannot distract myself from it whatsoever. I'm just locked in. So It's one of those things I need to sort of like keep some sort of distance from. So I'm thinking with this one, we've got our two different perspectives, and if we do it in a kind of extreme way, I might have, so they've spotted this sock in the distance, and then we've got them close up here, and I might have like a real extreme close up, so the sock is kind of coming out of frame to give you a bit more of a sense of scale. So with something like this, the joke kind of works in a sense, in that you can see that it's a sock, and then they've got up close to it. It kind of works without any words, but we got to think of some words to try and sort of enhance it a little bit with. So something like this would be like, nothing really amusing has happened at this point. So it could be just something like, oh, there it is. And this one, I think sort of part of the joke of something like this is if they're not questioning the fact that, like, how did my sock get so gigantic? I think that would be kind of, you kind of, the joke is them being silly about it or accepting it,
right,
as a premise. So if it was something like I somehow remember it being smaller. Or actually, the way it might work, I'm kind of trying to think of something this other character could say to add additional layer to it. So as I'm sort of trying to piece it together, sorry, you're watching me try and sort of work this out on the fly here.
I might have one. I might have one for this.
Oh,
one.
yeah?
Okay, so it's grown. Like, the first one's like, oh, it's grown. And then the other one's like, maybe we shrunk.
Yes. I was thinking something.
And you don't have to do that. I'm just saying that there could be.
No. I was thinking along something of similar lines. Like, what if it was like, I somehow remember it fitting better, and the other one saying like, you do have weirdly small feet, or something like that. That's like a disproportionate difference.
Yeah.
That like, it doesn't explain how big the sock is.
Right.
So I somehow remember it fitting better.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
And you could be saying, well, And there's lots of things with this where, like I often find myself thinking sort of about what the layout of a joke is, as much as what sort of the context of it is.
Yeah.
With something like this, you need it to sort of, you're always reading top down, right to left. So first thing you see is the character saying, "Oh, there it is." You look to the right, you see the sock. You've got a line there for the panel, and then you go down. The first thing you see on the left is the big sock. And he says, and then you need these panels, so they need to be sort of positioned in the right way to read from left to right. I somehow remember it fitting better. Well, you do have, I spelled that wrong. Weirdly small feet. And there it is. Ha 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 ha. We've written a joke.
It's great. I love it. And it is interesting how it can go lots of different ways as well. Like you kind of have the visual version, and then you have like the text, and you could probably iterate on that a lot.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the fun of looking at something like this one, where you've kind of got a setup, and it could be a funny thing that the banana's saying. It could be like a headline in a newspaper. It could just be a piece of text. There's all sorts of different ways that you can take and interpret that situation. And I think the thing I like about something like doing something like this is like, what are the iterations you're making to try and sort of make it a little bit funnier? And you don't want the reader to be thinking about different layers that something's working on. But you're sort of taking, oh, there was a sock in the different distance. Oh, it's bigger. But the actual joke is why don't these two understand scale, and why the sock would fit on the feet or something like that. The joke's kind of on the character. Yeah. So you're sort of taking that premise and like, what can I do to kind of ratchet this up to make it funnier?
Just on the captions of the previous one, we did have a few from chat.
Oh, wow.
Alessandra was, to get my message across, I'm going to wear a pointed hat. Mine was terrible. Mine says, "These things drive me bananas." If the banana was saying it, but bananas don't exist. And Johanna's, which I think might be the winner, says, "Ouch, these humans are everywhere. It's like they grow on trees."
That's great. I have to say, I didn't quite understand the pointed hat. Can you read that one to me again?
To get my message across, I'm going to wear a pointed hat. A point hat. I don't quite understand it either. Maybe you could fill us in.
Is it a banana
that
wears a pointed hat? I'm sorry.
Maybe it's the pointed hat from the banana. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you're onto something, Alessandra. That's great. I'll show you the one that I had for it. I like the people growing on trees.
Yeah, it's like an additional thought.
Yeah, it could be something about like
we have about 2 minutes, by the way. I can't believe how fast.
Oh, really? Okay.
I feel like we've been on for 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll just leave you with my suggestion from it, which was if it was an ad for like a personal injury lawyer. So it says, "Have you been injured in an opposite day incident? Call 1-800-SLAPSTICK Legal PTY today." So you can call the slapstick lawyers if you've been injured on opposite day.
Yeah.
So great to have some different versions of that. Thank you so much. This was quite an experimental session. So thank you guys for sitting with me as we sort of dug deep on jokes and had a look through the book. It's been really interesting and a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. And again, coming kind of full circle from kind of little spark here on Adobe Live, which is awesome. One of my favorite things ever to hear that something like that happens. But Bill, I had a great time. I mean, the fact that I completely lost track of time and I'm just sitting here having a blast with you shows how much fun I had. I hope everybody enjoyed that. We'll be back next week with more Adobe Live. And we hope you can join us again. Thank you, everyone in chat. Thank you, Johanna, for looking after us and all the puns and everything. Bill, I can't wait to hang out with you again next time on Adobe Live.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, Flynn. See ya.
Yeah, bye.